lawmakers, including some in both parties, criticizing the DOJ for the next step, also late in its compliance with the Epstein transparency law. The DOJ sent a 6-page letter to Congress. This is required by that law, and it discusses the very controversial redactions and purports to list all the government officials and politically exposed persons that are named in the files. That's one of the law's requirements. But the list doesn't really pass muster. With very little context, it includes some names that are exposed, including President Trump, Steve Bannon, Les Wexner, a billionaire tied to Epstein, and then others like Janis Joplin and Marilyn Monroe, which is hard to understand because it's not understandable. Those individuals, long deceased, do not fit in the congressional definition. So it raises the question, one, why are they on this list? And two, did the DOJ even proofread and correct this list? Does it care about even seeming like it's accurate and on the level? Heat continues on Attorney General Bondi. Even some conservative commentators have suggested that her time is up, that she should resign after a bonkers and combative congressional hearing where she really made it a point not to answer questions despite being under oath and that being part of the job of showing up for an oversight hearing. Lawmakers continuing to call her out.
This is a massive cover-up being led by the White House and the DOJ.
Do you still have confidence in Pam Bondi as Attorney General?
I don't think Pam Bondi has confidence in Pam Bondi.
The actual files that have been out in the public or that we've seen, they're overly redacted.
Ultimately, it's her who is responsible for the document production.
The last voice you heard is a Republican member of Congress discussing the obvious. Despite all of the lower standards or rank incompetence that has been on display in the administration recently, the Attorney General is responsible for this. And the letter's not accurate. And they already broke the law by being this late. And Bondi's been caught making several misstatements or lies about the Epstein files. So in a healthy, normal democracy, you would have accountability for that. The person might resign, trying to show the president they get it, or they might be removed by the president. Or if the malfeasance is proven, Congress might ultimately consider impeaching Bondi out of her role, something that former Trump lawyer Ty Cobb talked to us about, making some headlines. That was just last week. As for what we're learning in the files, well, there was one Trump confidant, Tom Barrack, who is the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and has been a special envoy, who had contact with Epstein for years. Commerce Secretary Lutnick only admitted that he visited Epstein's island after the new files showed that he'd been lying about that in public. Other powerful individuals outside of the Trump cabinet and administration have faced far more accountability than people working for Trump. There was a story we reported on when it first broke that Casey Wasserman, who's really a powerhouse figure behind the scenes in L.A., not maybe a name that everybody knows, but you know all his clients. He's one of these super agents. And so many of his clients have basically protested his link to Maxwell in the files, saying they would or will leave if he doesn't do something, that he's actually selling his entire agency, his entire empire, because he doesn't have clients who'll stand by him. Or Obama vet and prominent business people ousted. International figures have been held to account.
There is new bipartisan frustration in Congress after the Justice Department sent a list of, quote, politically exposed persons in the millions of files related to its probes of Jeffrey Epstein. That list includes many prominent figures who appear in the files without any context, like Janis Joplin and Pope John Paul II. No one name besides Epstein and his accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell has ever been charged in connection with Epstein's crimes. Several lawmakers argue the Justice Department is intentionally muddying the waters on who was a predator versus someone simply mentioned in an email or perhaps an article.
Billionaire Tom Pritzker is stepping down as executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels over his ties to Jeffrey Epstein, saying he regrets his association with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Meanwhile, the Justice Department sent a weekend letter to Congress listing hundreds of prominent people listed in the Epstein files. But there's a but, and it's a big one. Being mentioned doesn't necessarily mean anything. Elvis Presley is in there, and he died almost 50 years ago. which raises questions about why DOJ sent this 6-page letter that you saw with scores of prominent names. Yes, there are some presidents, business leaders, government officials who have been well documented in their ties to the convicted sex offender. But there are many others who are simply talked about in the Epstein emails and texts. You are on the Oversight Committee. That's one of the jobs and the committees that you sit on in Washington. One of your colleagues, Democrat Ro Khanna, said that this is DOJ's attempt to muddy the waters. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace pointed out that the list is, quote, missing names. What's your reaction?
Yeah, it's selective release. We've seen this consistently. There is an agenda that this DOJ has, and that is why the American people simply do not trust the leadership in Washington right now under this administration, because it feels as if it's more about protecting pedophiles than it is in actually seeking truth and justice, which is the job of the Department of Justice. So sadly enough, just like when we saw the initial release of the Epstein files, we saw that there were victims' names that were released as well, and it was clear that that was intentional. Sadly enough, I feel like that was an attempt to intimidate these amazing survivors. And frankly, we saw when Pam Bondi appeared before Judiciary, the other committee that I serve on, that they absolutely were the courageous ones, and our pathetic Attorney General, sadly enough, is not doing the job that she swore an oath to do.
There's so much that was redacted from these files. I know you are one of the lawmakers who went in and looked at some of the unredacted documents. What were your takeaways?
No, that's actually not the case. I went in to see unredacted files, and of the files that my staff had listed that they wanted me to go ahead and try to review, all of those files were still redacted. And so I was asking the staff that was there, why is it that I am here? And basically it was just a waste of my time. This is another thing that concerns everyone, whether you're talking about a Ro Khanna or a Thomas Massie. There's a lack of transparency and seemingly an attempt to cover up. It is really sad that the United States has historically led this world, and right now we're seeing the United States fall for so many reasons. We see leaders all around the world that are resigning. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understand what happened. So you went in, as did many of your colleagues, to see unredacted files. But was it the specific files that you wanted to see that they would not unredact? And
correct.
Why do you think that is? Do you know the context around those?
I don't know exactly what all I was supposed to see if it had been redacted. My staff gave me a list of specific files that they were like, we think you should try to go and look at these. They have 4 computers set up for all 435 members of the House. I sat down at one of those computers. They showed us how to go through the process of actually seeing the unredacted version. I then had to have the person that taught us how to do that to say, wait a minute, am I doing something wrong? Because as I continue to search specific documents, they are coming up and they are redacted. And so the explanation that I was given is that that must have been how they were sent over. And there are a lot of documents that they've been getting the same issue. They've been trying to resolve, I will say, because a lot of members have had that problem. So they were taking note of everything that I was trying to unredact and denoting that they were not available in an unredacted form.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee. Hi, Congressman. So what was your immediate reaction when you read this list of names, which includes people like Marilyn Monroe, who died when Epstein was just 9 years old?
Get real is my reaction. It's nonsense. These monsters were forwarding news articles about me. And if you check these billionaires' emails today, I bet they're still talking about me because they're worried. They're worried about many that they've listed in that email, and they should be, because I and many others that they're trying to muddy us up with are not going to rest until every single one of them has been brought to justice. So this is just a distraction. The American people want to see justice on these files. The Congress has asked for this. It's not going away, Pamela. And as I said, I'm not going away.
Notably,
the victims aren't going away, more important.
Well, certainly, and we will continue to talk to them. Notably missing from that letter, I noticed, were names like longevity Dr. Peter Attia and Steve Tisch, co-owner of the Giants, both of whom communicated with Epstein in the emails in the most recent dump of files. They haven't been accused of any wrongdoing. But what do you make of that? This big list of names, including Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley, and then those names not actually being on the list.
And also, by the way, the name that is listed the most in these files and talked about the most is
McDonald's in big trouble because the FBI and the DOJ have basically put a bull's eye right on the White House. In a lot of ways, they have tried not to do that, but they can't avoid it. Even if it's unintentional, accidental, subconscious, whatever the case, it still lands there. What they were trying to do and couldn't pull off was muddy the waters. They tried to fully protect Trump. They tried to say the files didn't exist. They tried to say he wasn't involved. And remember that short phase like a one-day thing, where they tried to act like he was secretly some kind of spy in Epstein's world, like he was infiltrating to save children and all that. They pushed it for a day. It didn't work and they dropped it. But the point is, they have tried everything. So now the latest respect move, which also isn't working, is this: we are going to say all these names are just people of interest in the board Epstein's documents. Yes, Donald Trump isn't there, but so are a bunch of other people. A lot of those people are only mentioned in phrasing, like they are barely connected. And I'm not saying the unredacted names shouldn't be everybody expects the survivors. But there is a real difference between being named in the files and actually being a real person in Epstein's world. Like, some people show up in the files because Epstein and his circle did not like them. For example, Bernie Sanders get mentioned in messages like we have to defeat Bernie. The Epstein crowd didn't want Bernie to win. So yeah, he's in the files. But that's not the same thing as being one of Epstein's buddies who visited the island. Other people are mentioned because someone is sharing a news article, and the article is about that person, but the person isn't actually involved in the conversation. So again, they're in the files, but only because a third party casually brought them up. Then you have got people like Trump, who was one of Epstein's best friends for at least a decade, and other people who obviously belong in a serious discussion about Epstein's inner circle, but they're trying to make it all sound the same. So you lose the perspective of whose Epstein's closet friends really were and his best buddy was.